is because of what we've just done. I really appreciate the time that Judy sets the stage and leads us into some of the songs that just really build me up. So I'm very grateful. And Bob's the one who engineers them up on the screen here, and that really carries us too. If you've got a few people in the room that think, okay, if it's just words up there, we're in trouble. But the choir in the background, that's just really good. And I never cease to be amazed at times that I come here and something that I thought I was going to share with you. Judy's just laid a wonderful table right out there. Because she started out with, the separation with God. And anybody know what tomorrow is? Ash Wednesday. Anybody know what Ash Wednesday is? Beginning of Lent. Anybody know what Lent is? Okay, yeah. I grew up in a church and it was sort of a quiet, serious season. It didn't start that way. When's the first 40-day fast? Anybody remember?
Christ did.
Before that? Moses on the mountain?
Yes. No.
Another 40 days later on, Jesus in the wilderness. The idea of 40 days, I think there's some themes back there in the Bible is where actually Lent started. It was like, we're going to spend 40 days getting ready for Easter. And that's why in the early days of the church, when they planned out Lent, it started with Ash Wednesday, the Western tradition. Sunday's not counted in that 40 days. Otherwise, you get to 46 before you get to Easter. Okay, so Sundays are kind of off day. It's a way of saying, okay, yeah, it's going to be serious. Well, on Sunday you get to celebrate, because Sundays, why do we worship on Sunday?
Easter, Christ was.
Yeah, the Sabbath for the Jewish people was always on Saturday. But he was resurrected on Sunday, so the early church, in celebration of his resurrection, said, that's the day we're going to worship. That's the message. Not just his death, but his resurrection. But somehow, kind of through the Middle Ages, the season of Lent began to focus more on sobriety, and it started tomorrow night. We're going to do the thing with the ashes. But the message during Lent for us is going to be, and now what? Or so what? If all of what you got was Jesus' death and his suffering, well, then I guess we wouldn't have to suffer. How's that without a resurrection? The whole issue of his suffering was it because he's going to be alive again. He's going to break the power of death. And he's going to come back to get his people. So we look forward to our resurrection because he's resurrected. And that's why we celebrate on Sunday. So historically, Lent, you saved your serious focus of his suffering until Passion Week, which is what? The week right before Easter. Right, which includes Monday, Thursday, Good Friday. So you didn't start on Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday, some years later on, was the day after what? Shrove Tuesday. And what is another word for Shrove Tuesday is? Fat Tuesday. Fat Tuesday. And the idea. Did any of you grow up with the tradition you had pancakes on Shrove Tuesday? Okay, I wasn't familiar with that. That's kind of recent, my understanding. But the idea was you got rid of all the fat-rich things to make pancakes, and so you kind of got out of your system. And after a while, I think a lot of our culture, they know what Mardi Gras is, but they've completely forgotten what Lent is. It's kind of like, let's see, Wednesday I'm going to have to be serious, so today I'm going to party hardy. Our culture understands that party, whatever it may be. But that's complete misunderstanding. It's like the third rendition. The first one was, you spend some time getting ready for the resurrection. Now, the week before, that was Passion Week, so you focused on the suffering and death of Christ. But these weeks before were intended to be getting you ready, so you're really jacked up. When Easter came, you said, I got it. That's it. What Judy talked about in the beginning was this separation between God and man. And I'm going to just briefly talk through some things we've already talked about and kind of help us connect the dots for a purpose. And that is starting with in the garden where God said, it's all good. On day 6, he said, it's very good. And on day 7, it said, he rested from his labors. But as we said before, it says evening and morning, day 1, evening and morning, day 2, all the way to day 6. But he doesn't say evening and morning about day 7. It doesn't say evening and morning, the Sabbath day. It just said God rested from his labors. There's a reason for that. When you go to Exodus, it says, because as I gave you the 10 Commandments, it says, okay, I want you to remember the Sabbath day. Okay, I rested. If you go to Deuteronomy, it says, because I brought you out of slavery, therefore the Sabbath. You get to Jesus, and Jesus explains it, if you can understand what he's saying. Man was not made for the Sabbath was made for man. Now let's back up, put that back in the garden. If the Sabbath was made for man, then day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, God said day 6, it is all done. Everything that you will ever need, it's all finished. Can you say it's finished? It's finished. It's done. He said, now Adam, you work the garden, but he only worked in what God had given. It was finished. It was done. Okay? We together so far? Mm-hmm. So the next day was not to be a day. It was to be the way Adam would live forever. Trusting and resting in what God had finished. Okay? And I remember last time we talked about this, I said, when did God finish again? The next time.
On the 6th day.
When he said it's finished. On the cross, no, let's back up the garden again. God said it's finished, and somebody snuck in and says, no, he's holding out on you. There's something else. God hasn't told you that if you eat of that tree, there's something more. You can be like God. And the temptation was not to trust what God had said, it's finished, and add something to it by his ability. And guess what? We've been running wheels off that thing ever since then. He says no. And so when Paul says in Hebrews, strive to enter into rest. He talks about the children of the Old Testament. They didn't enter into the promised land. They didn't enter into his rest out of disobedience. Adam, disobedience. He didn't trust what God had finished. Okay? The Israelites coming out, they didn't trust what God had said. I have given you the land. I've given it to you. It's yours. And I will take you in. You can trust me. They go to Jordan River and they say, there's giants in there. And God says, can't go in with that attitude. So he says, okay, all you guys 20 years of age and older, you're going to die in the wilderness. Until they all died, except Joshua and Caleb. And then they went in, and Joshua led them in. And it says as long as Joshua led Israel, Israel obeyed the Lord. Good baton pass. But they had to go through a time of sorting out, what are you going to trust? Are you going to trust what you can do, what you can see with your eyes? There's giants in the land? Or are you going to trust what I told you? I have already given you the land. And I will open up the way and defeat your enemies in front of you. You can go in. It's the land I promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's yours. I've already provided that for you. I've given it to you. When we trust what God has given, rather than trusting what we think we might need to add to it, or change it just a little bit so we like it better, whatever that may be. That's why the book of Revelation says, cursed is the one who adds or subtracts from words of this book. God's sort of serious about saying, look, when I said it's finished, that means it's finished. All of what you need, I have provided for you. It's finished. When we trust that. Now, how easy is that? There is still work to do in the garden for Adam and Eve. God provided everything. And when Christ provided the cross, and he said, it's finished, that's true. But guess what? That little whisper is still going to come to my ear. But how about, and we'll start adding to it what we think what we should do, woulda, coulda, shoulda, we shouldn't have done. So if I hadn't done that, if I do this, God says no. It is finished. Now, the issue of Lent was supposed to focus on that it's finished. And he has given us everything we need to do. So for a period of time between when Ash Wednesday started and Easter, was supposed to focus on, are there things that you're kind of encumbered by? Are there things that you're kind of dragging around? Paul says in Hebrews 12, lay aside those sins that so easily entangle you. You ever seen a picture of the Western movie where the horse is what they call hobbled? Little piece of rope around his 2 front feet. He just can't get up any speed that way. That's the word. He says, lay aside those sins that so easily entangle you, keep you from being free or moving. So it was a way of saying, okay, Jesus has done it. He's finished with it. He's provided for me everything I need. So Lord, if there's anything that's keeping me from entering into the full expression and trust of that, then, set me free of that. If instead of focusing on the freedom that he's given us, we start focusing on always and only and more and more and more on his suffering and death, rather than the power of his resurrection, then I'm afraid we've taken a detour that we don't need to take. Now, I enjoy the season of Lent. I enjoy the preparation. The church has historically had purple as the color of preparation before Easter and before Christmas. For me, it's just, I love gathering together the stories of what that's all about. And I've probably run the risk in the past of focusing a little bit too much on how terrible that was. And I'll tell you why in just a moment. Let me back up and gather another thread. We've talked about covenant in here. The Old Testament covenant was, in any culture of thousands of years, has a practice of blood covenant in it. The Indians, blood brothers. Okay, Tom Sawyer, prick your thumb and sign it. In every culture we have some, but not necessarily understanding that. When you made covenant, for example, Bob and I are going to make a total covenant. We take our coats, our weapons, our money, purse, pile them together, or we exchange them as a way of saying, what was his and mine, that gets lost now, because this is now ours. Because a covenant binds you together. A contract protects you from somebody. A covenant binds you together. What therefore God has joined together, don't let anybody separate. God becomes involved in the making of a covenant. You take an animal, you walk between the pieces, and as you did, you'd speak every possible blessing and every possible curse upon each other. Now, I believe marriage is a covenant. The idea that at a wedding party, a bride and groom would speak blessings and curses on each other just sounds kind of kinky to some people, until I say, well, have you heard these words? I take you for better for worse, richer for poorer, sickness and in health, the blessings and the curses of the covenant. That's a way of saying, when we keep this covenant, may God bless that. If we break the covenant, there's hell to pay. It's painful. Something is broken, and the difficulties are designed to say, okay, we need some healing. Now, one person can't heal the other person, but they need to get healed themselves, whether the marriage is ever restored or not. So I'm not being critical of anyone who's gone through divorce. That happens. I understand that. But the model between people is really the model of Jesus and his church. It says that by the washing of the water and word, he might present to himself a bride without spot, break, or blemish. So let me back up. Joseph and Mary made a covenant of betrothal. Remember that word? Weird word? Not engagement. Betrothal. And in Jewish terms, a betrothal covenant was a covenant. They were bound together. Everything was Joseph's and everything was Mary's, or would be, had been put into that covenant. But when they made the betrothal covenant, Joseph would go away and prepare the house. And Mary would go away and she'd get prepared. Apparently mom wasn't around because Elizabeth took that place and helped her get ready. Problem was, when she came back, she was pregnant. In other words, from Joseph's perspective, she had broken covenant. And in Old Testament rules, if you break that covenant, you got stoned to death. So he's going to divorce her secretly because he didn't want harm come to her. But the Holy Spirit in the dream said, no, that which is in her is of the Holy Spirit, so take it to be your wife. So he did. And he kept her virgin until she gave birth to the child. In Old Testament tradition, the groom would go away and prepare the place. John 14, Jesus says, behold, I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, you can be also. He's building a house. That's the groom's job. The bride would go away and she'd be preparing herself, that by the washing of the water and word he might present himself a bride without spot, wrinkle, or blemish, or any such things. Ephesians 5, when it says what I'm really talking about is Jesus in the church. The church is getting prepared. When the father of the groom and the father of the bride both saw everything was in place, the house was ready, the bride was ready, he'd say, son, you can come get your bride. And the bridegroom cometh, those parables in the New Testament. That's what that's about. In Joseph's case, don't know if he had a dad or if Mary had a dad, don't know. But anyway, when Mary came back, well, the Lord had to reinstate that, and then they were married. He took her to be his wife. That marriage covenant was determined, the time of it was determined by the Father. Now see, you come to Acts, and the disciples say to Jesus, is it now, Lord, you're going to restore your kingdom? He said, I don't know, only the Father knows. And so he says, the Father knows that when the place is prepared, I got that done, I go prepare a place for you. When the bride is prepared, by the way, when the last person willing crossed the Jordan River in the Old Testament, the high priest came, when they finally entered into the promised land, the high priest came and put their foot in the water, and the Jordan River backed up, and Israel started crossing over. They kept going until the last person willing crossed over, and then they went ahead and the river flowed. There was no crossing over. Where it says, when every ethnic group, ethnic, has been evangelized, then will come the end. So God is saying, okay, when the last person willing, and that's not about a calendar, that's about the harvest. God isn't sitting up in heaven saying, let's see, man, 2025, I'm going to bring this thing to an end, so I better get busy. He's saying, look at the fields. They're white to harvest. Pray therefore the Lord of harvest to send forth laborers into the harvest. That's what he's saying. So God's waiting for harvesters to harvest the crop. And when the last person willing crosses over, then the end will come. But when the end comes, Judy mentioned before about this separation. It's a separation from God, but let me demonstrate the other way. Here is light and here is darkness. When the separation entered in, it's because darkness entered in, and that separation was total, absolute, and complete for all people from Adam on. Unless they accepted something God would provide. And so God provided garments of skin for Adam and Eve to cover them, instead of the fig leaves, which was their effort to cover themselves. And when he did, they were restored to fellowship with God. Now, we live in a mixed-up world. Ever since then, generation by generation, there are those who have understood that God has come and made a covenant with his people. When accepted, we're joining him again. And he's designed it in such a way not to punish us or to scold us, but if you go away from him, it's supposed to get rough. So you turn around and come back. Make a U-turn and come back. That's what Israel did repeatedly. They made U-turns because God put the locusts out there or whatever he sent. But someday, when the last person willing has crossed over, then he says the end is going to come. That's a nice melody. I like that. And when he does, he's going to separate all the light from all the darkness. Right now it's a mixed up world. Someday, he's going to be seated on the throne, and he's going to separate all the light from all of the darkness. Now, if you can picture right now, everything's all mixed up. You may be depressed. You may be discouraged. It may be the worst moment of your life. But the sun is still going to come up tomorrow. Most days. Birds are going to sing. There's order and beauty. You know, the world's still spinning. There's still hope if you're still alive. Okay? But when that day comes, all the glory, all the light, all the brightness, all the joy is what God's going to separate here. And the place of that we would call heaven. That's finally home. The place that Matthew says was prepared for the devil and his angels, not people. Because Paul says in the first letter to Timothy, God wants all men to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. That's his desire for every man. he separates the light from darkness. Those who've accepted the light and are children of the light and have accepted God's grace and favor rather than trying to work their own thing, which was a temptation. Adam and Eve has been a temptation for every generation since then. There will be a separation. When that separation happens, then no longer will, even on your bad day, sunrise in the morning, because it won't. There's only darkness and only despair. No presence of God at all. Now, when this day happens, then there'll be no choice to cross over. When they entered in, priests walked through that water, the river flowed, there was no crossing over then. It's given for man, Hebrews 9:27, once to die, and then the judgment. And that's not to scare us, but to invite us to trust the resurrection is the power, not just someday, of Jesus come back again. It's the power of life now. Now, if I told you I don't believe in life after death, what would you say? Don't answer me. Stay with me just a second. My dad is no longer living. My mom passed away a couple of years ago, July 15th. She's with the Lord. And Paul says, I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is far better. Okay, so my mom and my dad are in a far better place. That does not give me any hope at all. My hope is, 1 Thessalonians 4, brothers, I don't want you to be ignorant about those who have fallen asleep in the Lord. For we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and so he's coming back again with the voice of the archangel, the trumpet shout of God. That is going to be loud. He's going to come back. And all of those who have died are going to be raised first, and then we who are alive are going to be caught together with him to meet the Lord in the air, and therefore will always be with the Lord. And in that day, it says in 1 Corinthians 15, we will have a glorified body like his glorified body. There's only one glorified body in the universe. That's Jesus. He's the only one who's been resurrected from the dead. I know Lazarus, but that was back to this life. The life to come, the life restored, complete fellowship with God, naked, none ashamed. You can't see yourself separate from God, so don't know you're not. That day we would call heaven. That day hasn't happened yet, so there's no one technically in heaven yet. We have the promise, it's our inheritance. But that day where heaven is fully populated, that happens when he comes back again. And in that day, in that condition, there will be no remembrance of any sorrow. We will not remember here. We will not remember and grieve over ones who are not there with us. We will not remember and grieve over those who are not there. There'll be nothing to cause any sorrow at all. We'll be fully restored to the presence of God. And all the shadows of this earth, all the, as Paul calls them, momentary light afflictions. Do you remember Paul saying that? He talks about momentary light afflictions. Remember Paul's story? Shipwreck, stoned to death. They thought he was dead. Threw him on a heap outside the town. He revived and they brought him back in. Momentary light afflictions in light of the age to come. The resurrection isn't just that we go be with him when we die. The resurrection is a promise that he's going to come back again. And we're going to have a resurrected body and a life with him forever. But if you believe that, then you also got to believe there is someplace else for those who have never known him or accepted him. We live in time, and my apartment meter's ticking. So is all of ours. So are the other people who live here, or the people that we know. I think the first step for me is to say, Lord, I'm really grateful that you've revealed to me that you love me. My sister posted on Facebook a story about a guy named Jerry Bieber. Bieber. Have you seen that post? I'll have to get it to Judy because it's worth sharing. This guy grew up in kind of a Pentecostal holiness, if you know what that means, kind of background, and he went through a time when he was younger of being pretty depressed. found that alcohol kind of soothed that pain. Well, that really put him on the skids because he just wasn't what church expected him to be. One point he kind of circled back around and got beat up again, so he just kind of gave it up. And one day a friend of his called and said, I want you to come to church with me tonight. I said, no. I said, I tried that one. I'm not going to go get beat up again. The guy started crying on the phone. He says, no, I really want you to come, please. So he did. He sat in the very back, when close to the door so he could escape, but things got kind of crazy. Some of you may have been there. About that time, the pastor starts walking down the aisle and sits down beside me and thought, okay, here we go. He's going to really rip me a hole. And he opened his eyes, and the pastor was sitting there with tears in his eyes. What he said was, he just wants you to know he loves you. He just wants to love you. Somehow that broke through to him. And he experienced God in a way that he had never had before. That was about 15 years ago now. And his life now is telling people that there's a God who loves them. That's simple. We don't have to make a seed grow. We have to trust that what's in the seed is going to grow to give it half a chance. You don't plant it? I discovered I have some seed in my refrigerator in the garage that I've had there 4 years and none of them sprouted. You know what? I took those seeds, they were 4 years old, went out in the garden, and they sprouted. I thought, look at that. Somebody told me that they found some wheat, some of the pyramids in Egypt. You plant them, they grow yet. That's just phenomenal. In the seed is everything. In the seed. It's in the seed. You know what's in an apple seed? You know what's in an apple seed?
Baby apples.
A what?
Baby apple tree.
How about an orchard? Yeah. It's not just an apple. It's what that apple will also produce. And the seeds of that apple, the seeds of that apple. And when the church around the... How many of you have heard that Christianity is declining? Heard that? How many have heard that Islam is growing faster than Christianity?
Yes.
They lied to you. You know why? We're looking at America. You know why Islam is growing in America? They're moving here. I'm serious. Look at the numbers. Okay? You know why I know that the Christian church is not dying? It's because China is now approaching 50% Christian, and it's growing by the millions. It's astronomical. Our tribe, Lutherans, are fastest growing in Africa. The East and the South. America has now passed up. We were the third largest mission field in the world. We're now second. Brazil is getting to know the Lord. So we're moving up the stack on the most mission-needed country in the world. In America, things are on decline. And do you know why? I had lunch yesterday with a Guatemalan pastor. He's been in the States 30-some years, but he was from Guatemala. He was talking about the churches down there, and I said, are they growing by church planting or by discipling? He says, both. I says, right. Because in the rest of the world, they're planting churches that will plant churches that will plant churches. They're discipling disciples who disciple disciples who disciple disciples. It's turning into an orchard. In America, we're just not planting seeds. The truth is, we're not. And I had a conversation with somebody else this morning about why that is. I'm going to give you a picture. In the beginning of America, here was the political realm, here was the social realm, here was the medical realm, here was the school realm, here was whatever realm, all these different silos, and here was the church, giving birth to most all of it. All the hospitals started by Christians. Orphanages started by Christians. Yale, Divinity, all Christian school in the beginning. And over the years since then, here's this silo, and here's this silo, and here's this silo, and here's the church, and this is our silo. And we visited on Sunday morning and paid our dues, rather than living salt, light, and leaven in all the culture. I don't mean to offend anybody, conservative, politically conservative man this morning was asking me, why is nobody standing up? And he started talking about all the difficulties a lot of people see. I looked at him and said, you know what? I can tell you why. And I drew this diagram. I said, we're over here, a silo. And guess what? They ain't listening anymore. At one time in America, the church was the moral conscience and the moral compass of America. We left the public arena. And you can't vote it back. We cannot vote ourselves back into position of having moral influence in the country if we parked our silo over here separate from everything else that's going on. So the way back is what? Not through the polls. 2 Chronicles 7:14 gives us the formula. Many of you have heard it many times. I'll say it again. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways and seek my face, I'll hear from heaven, I'll forgive their sins, and I'll heal their land. I remember years ago when I heard that passage, when evil comes in like a flood, the Lord will raise up a standard. And I could just picture this flood coming, here's this dam, a voted place, whatever, I didn't know. And I've realized since then, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I understand something. When they had an earthquake in Missouri for a while, the Mississippi flowed upstream. Because you raise the water level here, it's going to flow that way. Normally it's flowing this way. If it flows this way, if it gets like this, when evil comes in like a flood, what's going to turn it back? A flood of righteousness that is higher than the flood of evil. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways, seek my face, I'll hear from heaven and forgive their sins and heal their land. You know what? God told Moses, there's a time where God was going to destroy Israel. And Moses says, oh, Lord, forgive them. This is what God said. I have forgiven them according to your word. You say, whoa, wait a minute here. You can just pray that God will forgive somebody else's sin. What did Jesus pray on the cross? He prayed, Father, forgive them.
They know not what they do.
Were they forgiven then?
Yes.
Now, the fact that God forgave them didn't mean that they were necessarily saved. But it could have set them free to be saved. Let me give you a practical story how that applies. Here's a young man. He starts off serving tables, and he is filled with the Spirit, and his serving tables birthed him into a place of being public about his faith. His name was Stephen. And they call him before the authorities and challenge him what he's doing. And he testifies before the religious government of the day. And they take him out, and they are going to stone him to death. And as he's being stoned to death, two things are happening. One, Stephen is saying, oh, Father, do not hold this sin against them. And who was the man holding the coats of those who were stoning him? Saul, who became Paul. You get the difference? You see the connection? God says, I give you my authority. All authority is given to me in heaven and earth, Jesus said. Go therefore. As the Father sent me, John 20:21, as the Father sent me, I send you. Receive the Holy Spirit. What he was saying was this. I want you to pray the mercy prayer for people who don't deserve it. I want you to pray my grace and my mercy upon those who don't deserve mercy. 1 Peter 2:9, for you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, who should show forth the praises of the one who brought you out of darkness and into his marvelous light. For once you were not my people, but nowadays you're the people of God. Verse 10, you were once not received mercy, but now you've received mercy. We didn't receive mercy because we deserved it. We got mercy because he gave it to us freely as a gift because of what he did for us. And now he says, free to you receive, free to give. God wants us to learn how to pray the mercy prayer for those we least want to pray for, and anybody in between. It's usually a lot easier to pray for somebody that you are related to, or you like, or you care about. Jesus said, no, pray for your enemies. Bless those who despitefully use you. Why? You might be the only one standing between them and a Christless eternity. And I would encourage you today not to take an assignment, go out and grab somebody by the lapel and say, hey, we need to talk. Pray long, pray hard, talk short. Remember that song? To tell the old story of Jesus. Can't do that anymore. You know why?
They don't know the old
Well, but you can tell them the old story. If you tell people today the story before you've listened to their story, they're not listening to your story. Let me say it again. We need to listen to people's story and listen for how his story is the answer to their story. And when you listen to their story, then you have a chance to declare to them his story. That's not hard to do. This isn't going out and grabbing a lapel trying to save someone, writing a notch in your Bible, your gun, or whatever else you do. This is caring about people. Deciding to sit with somebody at breakfast and then you'll sit with them. Seeing somebody in their faces about 4 feet long saying, hey, you all right today? Just striking up a conversation relationship where you live is God's way of giving you the opportunity as he unfolds it to take the next step. And so Jesus said something real simple. When you're called before kings or councils or with your friends and neighbors, don't worry about what you're going to say or how you're going to say it. After church Sunday, I said, just go ahead and be stupid. And then Yannick really appreciated that. She said, sometimes I feel so stupid. And we all do. God can use stupid. He just, doesn't matter how you plant the seed. Stupid will work. I like to pray for us. I don't know what that is, but I want to encourage you to be real simple and just say, Lord, show me one. Show me one person that if I don't pray for them, might be the person that will not join me in heaven someday. And just ask God for that person's life. And ask God to give you a mercy prayer for them. And then just listen. I mean, waiting for the chance to say the zinger. Caring about them. That's number 2. Just care about them. Pray for them. Care about them. And trust God from then on. You don't have to sometimes. Sometimes we just care for somebody and that's all it took for them to find out that somebody loved them. This man just needed to have the pastor walk back and say, hey, he just wants to love you. Sometimes we can do that with words. Very rarely is it going to fit if we haven't already done it by a hot cup of coffee and a handshake. Yeah? It's a lot more simple than what we've made it. It really is. Just ask God to show you how much mercy he's had on you. Pray mercy for other people and have coffee. Would you pray with me? Father, I am so grateful that I was born in the family I was because they loved me. And they shared with me your love. And Lord, that was an anchor in my heart, has been all of my life. I thank you for that. Well, there's other people around right now that don't feel very loved, don't feel very connected, and certainly don't know your love. And the open door may be just showing them a little bit of love, especially if we've already prayed that you could pour your love into their hearts. If you want to use us as an instrument, Lord, then give us the grace and the opportunity and courage to do that. But help us, Lord, to just come before you and ask you to have mercy on them. Your prayer from the cross. Father, forgive them. Stephen's prayer. Lord, don't hold us against them. Praying for them. We ask, Lord Jesus, in your name. Amen.
Amen.